Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog podcast. This is your host, Elias Roush. This podcast is sponsored by EliasRoushMedia.com, photo, video, digital media. Today we're discussing Mr.Robot, Season 4, Episode 8. Before we jump into the review, we're going to do a little bit of feedback from the previous episode. Derry C. said, "I'll never forget how the reveal made me feel. I covered my mouth with my hand, and the tears just started to stream. It immediately put a pain in my chest. It felt so real. Rami's acting felt so good that the scene deeply hurt me. I was genuinely upset and had to remind myself that Rami is an actor and he is okay." There was a speculation that behind the scenes that Rami Malek was a little bit withdrawn during the filming of Season 4, and this kind of, this episode would explain why. I mean, having to, bring those type of emotions to, your work and having to kind of get out of that phase has got to be difficult, to have to build all that emotion up and have to, regurgitate it every time. Hoffa Ball says, Mr. Robot, quote unquote, taking over Elliot's body has a whole new meaning. And absolutely it does. I mean, after the last episode, pretty much all interactions with Mr. Robot and flashbacks with his father are completely recontextualized. Everything's kind of flipped on its head. A lot of people were talking about, the specific signs that make way more sense now that we understand that he was being abused. Specifically, Creighton Divinity says, what signs they asked, what signs should we have been looking for through the previous seasons? And like I said, I don't remember if I said this in the previous podcast yet, but going through the seasons, Season 1, Episode 1, we're dealing with Ron, the pedophile from the coffee shop. Season 2, in the middle of the season, we have to deal with Craig Robinson's character. Season 3, we get a flashback of young Elliot being really cold and callous to his father at the movie theater, and we don't exactly understand what's going on. When we first watch it, we think that all of this animosity is built up from Elliot to his father. It's all because of him being sick. But once we realize that Elliot doesn't like being touched, he's extremely sensitive when it comes to taking out people that are considered pedophiles. I mean, throughout the seasons, we take out Craig Robinson, Ron's coffee shop guy, Jake Busey's character at the beginning of this season, and there is a theme that is going throughout the entire Mr. Robot series that really has to do with trying to rid of pedophiles and sexual abusers of all kinds, I guess. And it's kind of in the background is what I would say. It's not like specifically up front and spoken. And so I saw a couple of comments that said, oh yeah, I was, that's what people had been guessing a few times. I didn't hear anyone. I've listened to a few podcasts, Bald Move, post-show recaps, and a couple of interesting guys on YouTube, but I didn't hear anyone say that, that was what they thought, that the Mr. Edward Alderson was, abusing Elliot. I did not see anyone say that, but some people apparently say otherwise. They go, oh, yep, I got that. So, one more comment. We have, let me see. Someone got a lot of likes on this one, I think. Jason was born. They said they shouldn't have killed that guy off, which is implying Vera. There was so much character development in that one episode. I thought that just from the Vera side of the story, it was amazing. I mean, we learned so much about where he's been, what he's been doing, kind of his insight into why he's such a kind of, I don't want to say an insightful gangster, but I mean, he's much more metaphysical than any other quote unquote gangster that we really come across in most television. I mean, he's not just, guns blazing. He's this, really deep. He's always in deep thought. It really seems like, but it's always like a combination of him being on like strung out on like meth or something like that. But also he's coming up with these crazy astronomical, metaphysical ideas and stuff like that. So he was a really interesting character. I'm personally glad that we're kind of moving on from the Vera stuff. He's kind of small shrimp, and in the larger scheme of things. So yeah, he gave another great performance. I kind of have a mixed feelings of him kind of getting stabbed in the back at the very end by Krista, and then him falling on the floor, and then the lights go out. I'll just say real quick that I liked the execution of it. I'm not sure if that really is the way I wanted him to go out. He did some pretty heinous things to people that we really care about, Shayla and stuff like that. So I'm just glad that he got his just desserts, if that makes sense. I do have a criticism of that last episode. I haven't gone back and rewatched or anything, but I remember as it was happening when Elliot was kind of having all these emotions go through him and pass through him, and he's just learning all about the abuse he had to do. In Act 5, outside is like a whirlwind. It's like the thunder's crashing and the lightning's going insane every time Rami's at the window, kind of yelling his heart out, and it's kind of like the weather and atmosphere is reflecting how he feels. And so I thought that it was a little bit excessive, not quite campy or over dramatic, maybe slightly a little over, just a little bit over dramatic. I felt like it's such an important revelation that it was starting to take away a little bit from the performances in a way, and that's just kind of my only criticism about it. I understand it was supposed to be kind of like a stage play and whatnot, but I just I it did feel like my attention was going towards the atmosphere, kind of intruding into the storyline, and not so much of thinking about. I was like, this big revelation, and so kind of going back and reanalyzing the episode. That's probably one of my biggest criticisms, but it didn't ruin the episode by anything for me. I just thought it was just a little bit like we didn't necessarily need it in such an intense time in the series or in the episode is what I mean. So, yeah. Let's hop into the review. So I watched just a little bit of 7, and I just wanted to say once again, the signs of realization that Rami Malek displays are amazing. It's like several different signs of emotion of him just coming to realization that he has been abused as a boy, and it is just an amazing feat to watch. Obviously, because of the nature of how hard it is to watch, it's not something you're like aching to go back and rewatch. Me personally, but it is still an amazing episode. So going to episode 8, we have completed episode 8, and I will say, this is a very different type of episode, just as the last few episodes have been. I will say that I'm a little bit more on the mixed side on it. I did like some of the flashback scenes and some of the callbacks that we have in regard to the museum, and having some of our favorite characters come back throughout the episode. We have a little bit of Tyrell, we have a little bit of Angela. But ultimately, there are a lot of confirmed theories regarding Mr. Robot and the wrapping up of a couple of important plot lines. I will say I had some mixed feelings on the direction on some of the plot lines. I did think that the Janice, Darlene, and Dom plot line was a little bit on the weaker side, and I started to feel kind of sag toward the latter half. I guess it's kind of easiest to talk about each one of these plot lines by individual characters. So we go from Elliot. He's like in straight up shock. I was like not expecting him to be just completely shut off, but we get some nice flashbacks of what happens to be later events, and we go down into the museum and we find out that young Elliot had been I guess he put the bedroom key that his father used to use to get into his bedroom as a kind of a sign of a way he was trying to fight back against the abuse. And I do recall discussing that episode and the kind of significance and the relevance of having just the sheer amount of mystery regarding that episode. There's a key, there's the fish, there's the Angela, they're getting married. She's like, you put the key in the blah, 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 and you can't really tell what's going on. And then I'm pretty sure it's the same episode. He's in the mirror where Angela and Mr. Robot and Elliot are all shifting faces in the mirror. It's just like a crazy episode. And at one point, Tyrell has the bedroom key, and I know I said that all out of order, but overall, it's feels like the episode is blended up, and then like the important parts of the mystery are taken out of episode 3, and all of the detail is just like when you watch that episode, you're like, what the fuck's going on? This is the episode that fills in all the answers and all the questions that we've had for the past few weeks are relatively answered within this episode. Years since season 1. So I had always had like theories and thoughts about this, what the key and what the signifier is, and I guess Tyrell at one point talks about possibly knowing his secret, and I'm not really sure what the significance of Elliot or Mr. Robot telling Tyrell that at all would be. My only reason to think that Tyrell knows is because in the flashback or in the scene where Tyrell is sitting in season 1, episode like 3 or 4, whatever, when Elliot's tripping balls, he sees Tyrell sitting at his desk with the key that we eventually find in this episode of the museum. And so my guess is that Tyrell actually does know about this abuse. Now, I'm not really sure why Elliot would tell him that, or what the significance of him knowing that would be. And what does it mean? It could just be all for nothing. There's a couple podcast jabs from Janice talking about lightning hitting limestone and making cement. And she has some very weird and odd dialogue. As a Dark Army recruit, I think Janice has by far been the weakest of the past. What was it, Irving in season 3, and then Leon season 2. I don't think it was really difficult to top Irving. And something about Janice's portrayal of the character just, I don't know. The entire Dom, Darlene, and Janice scene really did. I'm not really sure what it lacked. I almost right off the bat, Dom is stabbed by what's it called? Let me see. Oh yeah, so Dom is stabbed by Janice, and the fact is, I never felt like Dom was, I guess, dying quick enough, if that makes sense. I mean, she was obviously suffering. They talk about, Janice goes into a deep detail about what's going to happen, or descript detail about what's going to happen to her if there's not medical attention applied to her. I'm like, if medical attention is not applied, this lady is as good as fucked. Like, she's in a bad state. I I noticed every time that we cut to Darlene, I really did feel like we were having a flat portrayal from her. I don't normally feel that from Carly Shaken's performance, but something about this episode, she was like, "Oh, I really didn't feel like I was getting the emotion from her. I felt like most of the time, if I saw somebody that I had a crush on or potentially loved get stabbed in the chest, I wouldn't be like, oh no, I don't know how to do something or reach somebody, or I felt like her emotion was just like really lacking. I felt like she was almost tired. If like we find out that she has something, like, she was knocked in the head and she's just like still dazed and confused, I guess that makes sense. But I really was, she was lacking for me. I'm curious if y'all were experiencing the same thing. Let me know in the comment section, of course. I kind of forgot to mention Peanuts and Javi when they go up to find Vera. They kind of have like a little Pulp Fiction Arby's 5 for $5 deal. They're trying to kind of do like a riff on like how they're talking like a Royale with cheese and Pulp Fiction, and it's kind of like hammy, and I'm not really sure if it's gonna jive with everyone, but it's okay. Lot of kind of smooth callbacks or kind of homages of sorts is what I would probably more or less compare it to. I kind of felt like A Clockwork Orange was kind of evoked here the with the breaking in of Dominic's family's house. I really liked how that was all in relatively one shot, and I mean it evoked some amazing fear from in just it was an explosion of suspense that went from like you're like, oh my gosh, I think something's gonna happen to something like, holy fuck. You start seeing those guys coming in the house. You're like, oh fuck, or like right before they come in the house, you see the boys expression, and you're like, oh my gosh, something big's about to happen. And of course the music bumps up again, and it's got this really dark tone that you're watching on screen with this really bright music, and that's what really reminds me of the Kubrickian Clockwork Orange. How he was always evoking like almost terrible imagery with I think it was Beethoven. So let me check the notes real quick. So after I I I was I was originally just going to talk about each individual storyline, but I thought following young Elliot kind of was like derailing the story a little bit. And I was like, this is a good revelation, but I feel like it's compressed, is what I would probably. Yeah, I would say it's compressed. It happened almost too quickly, this revelation to go to the museum to do all this. Like, what is the point in I understand the cathartic feeling of maybe saying your young self actually was fighting back in a way, or his Mr. Robot self was, because apparently he existed when he was that young. But honestly, the timing in it is what really bothered me. I was like, Darlene and the hack and the Dark Army and shit's going down, and you're over here trying to follow your young self down the subway, trying to have some like self-reflective moment, and in visually it's amazing to go back into the museum. I love seeing that little a massive 3D, I guess, I don't know, 3D model scaled map or whatever the fuck you want to call it. But yeah, so we find out the the monster that is referred in, I think it's episode 3 or 4 in season 1. The monster was his father, which makes sense. He hid the key in the museum to fight back, and I really did feel like this was a massive exposition dump, and I want to say that I felt like he was giving us 90%, and then he had to tell us another 40%, and it just felt like an overload of information. It's like, yeah, I get it. He was, he was abused, and now this is a moment to fight back. But I guess just putting the self-reflective moment in such a high intensive moment of, like the Dark Army's going on, Dom's about to get fucked up, or Darlene's about to get fucked up, someone's about to get fucked up, and he's over here just doing this, hide and seek, self-reflective game in the museum, and I'm like, yo, Elliot, let's go. I don't know if it's me personally or if that's what everyone's feeling, but I do think all clues fit. Still not sure about the exposition dump. There is, let me see. The tension in the Janice scenes, I think, are very strange. Yes, and did anyone get the commercial of the next episode before the end of this episode, like 10 minutes before the end of the next episode? Like, what is the thinking in that, USA? Like, y'all are doing so good with the commercial placings, and when it looks like the television or when it looks like the show's turning off, another cool commercial pops on that's actually a real commercial. But they put it's almost like a spoiler alert. I was like, whoa! Like I swear I started hearing Christian Slater's voice for next week's episode or something like that before the end of this episode, and Christian Slater was even on screen. So I was like, y'all are telling us that Mr. Robot's going to come back. Don't tell us that through a commercial. I was like, who the fuck put that there? I was like, that is ridiculous. Don't put the spoilers like 10 minutes before the fucking end of the episode, dumbasses. Jeez, getting mad over here. I mean, it just seems like a simple thing not to do. I'm wondering if anyone else got that. So eventually, Dom pulls the knife out of her chest after informing Janice that the lucky Irish bastard, I think, has killed the entire Dark Army that was taking over her family. And this is the Irishman from like the first episode, I think. And this guy has had like next to no line. I think he's had like one line in the first episode. And this Deus Ex Irish dude, everyone was putting money on it being Leon and Leon coming in to save the day. Or I don't know how Dom would have known Leon, but somehow it would have been Leon. It would have made 10 times more sense that would happen than this, in my opinion. Because having this guy come out of nowhere was just like, wait, who are you again? You were in this season, and I don't even know. And we're calling you the Irish guy just because you have this thick accent. It's like, come on. Sometimes this show feels so smart when it comes down to like placing conversations about with Angela and Elliot in the museum. It's like that was rooted in season 1, but then we have this like Deus Ex Irish dude come out of nowhere, and it kind of feels like it takes the wind out of the sails of how smart we were thinking. It's like, this was actually that one guy we put in that one scene at the very beginning. It's like, that I don't. I'm not. I'm gonna raise a red flag on that. I'm curious if anyone else is thinking the same thing. It's like, did I I need to go back and check, but I don't recall Dom ever having really planning for this at all. And I guess we don't exactly have to see Dom plan for this, but could she have not have thought of this guy before she was about to kill Darlene? Like, was this guy planned all the way back then? I feel like sometimes it's just like episode by episode, it's kind of whatever it needs to be. So it's like, sometimes it's it's real detailed, and then other times it's just like I don't know. Sometimes I got to call it like I see it. And I hate to do it because this is like one of my probably top 10 shows ever. I think it's one of the best looking shows I've ever seen. Okay, right before Janice got blown up or whatever, right before Dom got like 3 headshots and in like 2 seconds, there was a ceiling cam that was really cool. I thought the camera work was pretty good in this episode up until the 360 cam. I want to know anybody that was watching this on like a bigger television. Like, were you about to like pass out from this? Because I was. I mean, I'm kind of like hungover from the other night. I'm not gonna lie. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, I did not want to. I had to look down at my notes, and I had to stop looking at the screen because of how many times it was spinning. I mean, I didn't count how many times, but my guess is anywhere from 5 to 10, and it was fast. Like, I was getting like nauseous watching it, and then by the time the story started kicking back in, I was so nauseous. I was like, oh my god. I was like, camera work and storytelling can make you nauseous, but doing it physically, like shaking the camera around, like I haven't felt like that feeling since I was in Dunkirk after I went out partying all night and went to the Dunkirk theater showing or whatever. I went to the theater to see Dunkirk, about yacked all over the place because the damn airplanes are spinning all over the fucking screen and fucking Top Gunning and all up and down. It was insane. But that's what this felt like. I felt like I was spinning all around, and it was just kind of severely unnecessary. Like, what did that do to the story? You didn't need that. Just like the editing is so good in this show, 99% of the time. It's like I don't want to have to go back and even rewatch that. It was terrible. But this episode definitely was a little bit more choppier on, the pros and cons list, but I wanted to be fair. I didn't want to say that it was the best thing I've ever seen because, the story definitely had me at, top of the game. The acting, generally most of it was really good. I did find, Darlene's a little at points, but generally I thought she's pretty good. Is Dom gonna die on the floor alone? Kind of just like the way that she's like introduced, just alone. It's like, damn. Also, the callback with her masturbating to Darlene was very sly. I mean, it makes sense why we were watching that. It's like, why do we need to watch that, or why is she doing that? And so, it's so we can call, so Janice can use it as bait and leverage later. But yeah, I mixed feelings on the Dom plot line. I do kind of feel like they're spinning their wheels a little bit with the key finding and everything. I don't know what I wanted it to be. Honestly, there's like, for it to be like a key box for him to find, a videotape. He didn't need the key to go find anything else. Or I guess if that's the end of the key plot line, I guess then so be it. I just don't want to dwell on it anymore. And I don't know. Did anyone notice that Tyrell was wearing the blue shirt, very similar to the same type of blue that he was absorbed in the last episode we saw him in, which he probably died in? So it was interesting kind of Easter egg style episode with some of these flashbacks, callbacks, homages. But yeah, I overall really enjoyed it. Check out all the other LuckyDog podcasts, previous podcasts. We have all cataloged on Soundcloud, the LuckyDog podcast. Check out Twitch, paypal.me/LuckyDog podcast. to donate, keep the lights going, streams flowing, and lights glowing. Did I say that already? I don't know. It's getting kind of late, so let's hop out of here. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, comment, do your thing. TheLuckDogPodcast@gmail.com, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube's, all the good stuff, all your favorite social media. Thank you for listening, watching, whatever you're doing. Take it easy. Yeah, I actually kind of forgot to talk about how I'm just exhausted at this point. Sorry. Mr. Robot is definitely confirmed to be the father that Elliot wished he had had. And I think we had a few YouTube comments about that actually explored, and that makes the most sense narratively. The fact that it was kind of foretold way in advance does kind of feel like, if I would have binged this season, it would have been probably a little bit more impactful, but I'm not going to put points against it because of that. But yeah, it was definitely a very impactful episode. I was actually surprised that Mr. Robot came back immediately after that commercial. The only thing I saw of the commercial was like Philip Price, and then I saw I heard Christian Slater's voice, and I was like, up, I can't look, and then like immediately after that commercial went off, Christian Slater's like standing in the middle of All Safe, and then they have their kind of little cathartic moment, and he's kind of telling him he's sorry, and he was there to take all of the abuse, physical and not, emotional. He's there to take all the baggage, and it's kind of what you expect Mr. Robot to be. It's what I would have predicted he would have been. But I didn't think, I always thought he was taking the punches. I never thought he was taking the emotional punches. So he was really there to help. And we get the line, the "I am not your father" line. And that was kind of an interesting twist on the line, kind of an Empire Strikes Back callback. I was like, whoa, that's bold. And it does make it kind of interesting at the end where Mr. Robot kind of embraces him, holds Elliot by his shoulders, and Elliot is in a forgiving mode. He's forgiving him, and he's allowing him to hold him. And I did feel like Mr. Robot was putting a lot of pressure on him. I was like, Jesus, can you hold on? Can you calm down? But I don't. It was a sad scene. So Elliot is saying, he can't do it. He can't pull off the hack. And I'm like, what? You get this far and you can't pull off the hack? Are you serious? So I was thinking that it is kind of upsetting what we're seeing versus what is actually going on. So what we're seeing is, him coming terms with himself, the Mr. Robot part of himself. But in reality, he is alone. In reality, his father's a pedophile and dead, and he doesn't have a Mr. Robot in reality. So it is very interesting to think about what we're seeing versus what's really going on. So I was kind of surprised to see him kind of accept Mr. Robot back into his good graces this quickly. And I'm like itching to hear Elliot's voice. I'm just like, come on. I just talk to us. It's like I never realized how much I needed that in the story. It feels like it's just built in the DNA of the story. I mean, it's in episode 1. So Sam Esmail is really holding back on that. And I'm so surprised because Elliot as a whole doesn't have tons of dialogue, I guess, throughout the entire series, now that I think about it, because most of it is voiceover. And if he's not talking, it's like, God dang it, then who's talking? It's like, it turns into such a non-verbal communication style. It's just like, oh my gosh. So All right, you already know the rest. So thank you for listening. Take it easy. This podcast is sponsored by LiasRauschMedia.com. Photo, video, digital media production.